Hello and welcome to Salty About Health. My name is Dalaney and I'm here with my mom and co-host, Mary. So, Mom, why are we salty about health?
Good question. It's because both of us have had struggles, some more serious than others, and no one showed us simple ways we could jump into the driver's seat and take control.
And why are we sharing our views with our listeners?
Well, because we want our listeners to realize that it may take time, but with some simple knowledge about health, they'll be able to make a few changes and dig deeper to take control of their well being and live a more vibrant life.
That's fantastic. But right now, before we get into all of that, we just need to do some housekeeping. Here we go. This is an opinion based podcast. This is not in any way offered as a diagnosis or treatment for any disease, illness, or infirmity for physical or mental condition or any other condition you may have. We are not doctors or practitioners of any kind. Persons needing medical care should obtain it from a medical practitioner. So, consult your practitioner before making any health decision. The opinions offered here in this podcast are ours alone. Again, we're not doctors, and the banter you're going to be listening to is our view and our view alone. Okay, that's done. We, of course, also want to have an open dialogue with our listeners. So stay tuned to the end of the episode, and we'll let you know all of the ways that we can connect. Welcome, everyone. We are happy to have you back for episode 28. Today, we're going to start a short series on running. So, since Mom and I do not run, we have recruited a few of my friends. I seem to have made quite a few friends who like to run, so I can live vicariously through them, I guess. But they're going to share their experiences on running. So, you're getting some information from some more qualified people and how those people got into running. So, today we're going to talk with my friend Frances Trenta and ask her how she got into marathon running specifically. She's been doing that a lot since college, where that's where we met. But first, we are going to give you a little background on marathon running. And we are hoping that you will be inspired by Frances today and you may possibly take it up as a hobby because I am not.
You are so right, Delaney. Neither of us has taken up running, though you were exposed to it when you were in middle school and had joined a club track and field team, as I remember. What do you remember from that experience?
I did have fun. I would like to point out my best event was probably the long jump, so that really shows you my running streak. The best thing was the cool little honey energy, like all natural, just like little honey things that you gave me to help me like have energy for it. And the other cool thing was we went up to Flagstaff for an event and we lived below sea level in Yuma, Arizona. So to go up there, a lot of people on my team and from teams that came from all over got altitude sickness. I'm proud to say I did not.
Neither
So,
did your mother.
yes. Must have been our time in Colorado
Yes.
prepared us. So, yes, you notice all the things I talked about running, it had nothing to do with the actual running.
I was going to comment on that. And, you got food in there and yes,
Food, travel, my actual priorities in life. So, yeah.
yes. And you didn't mention how cold it was in Flagstaff because we went in February.
Yes. So people don't realize, like, oh, it's Arizona. It's Arizona. It snows at the Grand Canyon, in case anyone did not know that. So it gets really cold in northern Arizona.
Well, the elevation,
Yeah.
and I don't remember it, but it was funny because the kids that went from Phoenix and Yuma to the university up in Flagstaff normally, well, I'd say normally, but a lot of them would then switch back to either the other two state universities in Arizona because it was too cold even in the summer up there because the high is maybe 84, I think is what they would say. And that would be a really, really, really warm day up there. So
Hmm.
I know I almost froze to death in February up there. And I thought this is miserable. Thank goodness it was an indoor track meet though.
It was, yes.
So, okay. So I did find this interesting article in Men's Journal by Danny Dreyer, a running coach and ultra marathoner, and the author of the book called Chi Running. I love his quote. He states that running isn't all about strong legs. In fact, it isn't about that at all. And that, of course, intrigued me. And he also went on to describe how he uses principles from Tai Chi to run faster and injury free. So after we get done this podcast, we both might just take up marathon running.
Or Tai Chi. But yes, he did mention that in 1998, Dreyer was introduced to Tai Chi. I myself was introduced to Tai Chi via Jimmy Neutron movie, but
Something about purple flurp.
she did Tai Chi while drinking purple flurp,
Yes.
um, to, promote relaxation while bringing on tension. I don't know. Anyways, so for real Tai Chi, in Dryer's first class, the instructor talked about how you always only move from your center because that's where your energy comes from and that's where your strongest muscles are. So Dreyer said, all of the sudden, it was like things totally broke loose. I saw how much easier my running could be. He went on to say that most people run by powering with their legs and pushing with their feet. It means they have to propel themselves forward with the smallest muscles of the body. They're relying too much on those small muscles as opposed to the much stronger muscles of the core. And that's why the predominance of injuries are from the knees down. There's no question that's why it causes so many problems. And I think I've noticed that too when I watch people run as I drive in my car around to places. But they pump with their arms, and yeah, there's not a lot of core involved.
Yes, yes. And he informs his readers on how to change from using those small leg muscles to using your core muscle when you run. Dreyer said that chi running is based on posture. So if your posture is really bad, or in this case, really good, your core muscles will automatically be engaged. So that's if your posture is really good. So it involves a forward lean that starts down at your ankles. So if you lean at your hips, you still have to push yourself forward with your feet.
Hmm.
So from there, you allow yourself to fall forward. It's a controlled fall, which makes running easier because you're gravity assisted. As you fall forward, your legs don't have to be a propulsive force. The only work your legs have to do is support your body and to keep up with your fall. It just requires picking up your feet. You become not only more efficient, but you're also not overusing those small muscles. It also reduces your impact. Dreyer then says that the successful Tai Chi artist doesn't resist a punch. He cooperates with the force and moves in the same direction. So in Chi running, there are two forces, the pull of gravity, which you cooperate with by leaning into it, and the road coming at you. The last thing you want to do is stick your foot into that oncoming force. If you can land with your knee back and your foot underneath you, the road sweeps your leg behind and helps move you forward. And just to say, we do have a link to this article and you can see pictures.
I was gonna just ask that. I was like, is there a video of
Yeah.
someone running like
Yeah,
this?
he's got actually a great YouTube following also.
Okay.
And I mean, the way he says it, it just makes you feel like it would be easy then to take
Mm.
up marathon running.
Yeah, like you're not resisting it anymore. You're just
Yeah.
going with it.
So definitely from your ankles forward and not your hip.
Oh, that's really interesting. And he also says that the biggest difference in Chi running technique and the biggest challenge he has in coaching people is just getting them to pick up their feet instead of using them to push themselves forward. He says you have to kind of start from scratch and feel what your legs want to do, which is just keep up with your fall. Dreyer says kids naturally run with a lean, they just intuitively do it that way. So it's getting people back into that natural original form of running, which I've seen babies do that running, and it terrifies me because they constantly look like they're about to fall down.
Yes, yes, I agree. And of course, he has a book. We have linked it also on Amazon. And because Dreyer says that the vast majority of people will easily learn this approach in one day, he stresses practice and to focus on the posture, which is detailed in his book, how to hold your arms, etc. And he states that if they have a reasonably good connection with their body, they can get to a point where it feels very natural within a month.
Wow. And the book also is really thorough, and it's designed so someone can start from scratch and be able to work up to a half marathon within 4 months. And we'll have to ask Francis if that's like a normal time frame for training for a marathon. He teaches a very holistic approach, breaking it down into phases. So the first phase is getting your brain around it, right? Like, why am I doing this? And he believes it's a very important to start with a vision. And then the next phase is dedicated to working on your technique. So you can't do a marathon on training alone. It has to be based on really good movement patterns. So then he moves you into the conditioning phase where you build up your mileage. And the next phase is mastery, in which you find the specifics of that course, like hills and flat sections, and mimic them in your training. So you'll get into race day knowing exactly what to expect.
Yes, and Dreyer also focuses on how many steps per minute is most efficient. He says you should be aiming to take 170 to 180 steps per minute because it's the most effective cadence. Dreyer says that if your cadence drops below 170, it generally means you're spending too much time on the ground and are burning too much energy just supporting your body weight. And if your cadence is too high, it usually means you're using your leg muscles too much to propel yourself.
And he also stresses that strengthening your core is a must with chi running. So I feel like I definitely need this part no matter what. Recommends doing planks, bridges, light crunches. So rather than doing a full setup, you just pull up the upper body and hold it. And that's great because it's an isometric exercise, and leaning forward is isometric as well. So, I mean, we even talk about that in volleyball. Like when you're at practice, you want to be practicing game like movements. So my husband coached for a long time, and he hates some drills that have, are so one-sided and not using the net and not actually like using moves that you would use in a game. So I feel like this is really similar. Another thing that you can do to help your core is just stand next to a couch and rest your quads against the highest point and then lead forward and hold it.
I like that one too. But I do love planks.
I do. Have you ever done oblique pit planks? I like those where you're on one side and then you have to put like your arm up
I do that
on the
every
other
night.
side. Okay, well I don't like them that much.
I do it where I'm on my, I guess my what forearms, and then I go up straight arm, and then I
Hmm.
do the side ones. So yes,
Yay.
You- it's great. I read somewhere once it was either in Chinese medicine or Ayurvedic that if you have a strong core, you that's like the best thing you can do for yourself.
Hmm. I mean, it does literally everything, so it's pretty important.
So why aren't you doing it every night before you jump in the bed?
I don't know.
We'll have to change that. Okay. So he also stresses that you need to create the conditions for speed to happen. So there's a number of things to keep in mind when you do a speed workout. You're not doing it necessarily with the goal of getting faster, but the goal of increasing my range of motion by teaching your legs to kick back farther. You don't want to reach forward with your legs. That's overstriding. That's danger. The feet should land as close to under your center mass as possible. And you want to relax your hips so your legs can swing farther while working on your balance so you can lean forward more.
And with all of that in mind, we're now going to bring Francis in to chat with us. So everyone, I'd like to introduce Francis, and I'm just gonna say now that I call her Trent from volleyball because it is a nickname from her last name, Francis Trenta. So I'm sorry if I say that during the interview because Francis is weird to me. But anyways, so Trent, can you tell us about how you got into your marathon running, and also if you've ever heard of the chi running?
Yeah, so I'm Francis. I know Dalaney from volleyball from college. So basically how I got into marathon training was I was a college athlete. I was a volleyball player. I ran a little bit of track, but I was a volleyball player through and through. And after college ended, I kind of was super lost as to like, what my fitness goals were, what my athletic goals were. And so one of my friends reached out and said, hey, let's train for a half marathon, might as well do it, kind of a bucket list thing. And yeah, so kind of was just like, okay, let's do it. I've never run more than 3 miles in my life, and even that was kind of like a stretch. And so I trained for it, loved training for it, really fell in love with running. Very slow, but really loved like the whole process of it. So then that just kind of spiraled, ran a couple more half marathons, and eventually took the plunge into full marathons. And that's where we are now. So
oh my gosh,
it's pretty great. And chi running, I actually had never heard of it until you guys had mentioned it before, but I think it's a really cool concept. It's just kind of about like running like with a more natural form and, running with a midfoot strike, which is like hugely preached in the running world now, and kind of running, with your major muscle groups and stuff. So I thought that was really cool when I looked that up, because it's definitely a lot of the ideas I've heard along the way of like my running journey is kind of like good form to keep yourself injury free. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that is so cool. So tell me how you prepare for a marathon.
So for me, definitely, I always keep like a pretty good base of running. So usually I'm running between 15 and 20 miles a week, like even when I'm not training for anything, just as like my normal fitness schedule. So once I decide to sign up for a marathon, I usually know, like most of mine, I've known a year ahead of time that I'm going to do it. So once it's maybe like 6 months out, I'll kind of just make sure I'm getting that base, make sure I'm strength training and doing all that kind of stuff. And then I'll do an official 18-week plan. And I use this guy called Hal Higdon. He's like a running legend, and he has free programs online that you can just download. But it's a pretty strict 4 to 5 days a week running. I'm really strict about not missing any runs, trying to not miss any workouts during that 18-week period. So that way I'm going into race day in the best shape that I'm in, as good as I'm going to be as far as not getting injured. And then I'm going to survive the race and like actually be able to enjoy it.
Wow, I'm impressed. I mean, did our
know.
listeners hear that? 15 to 20 miles? Did you say a week?
Yeah. So
Wow.
that's only, I'll that'll be 4 days a week. I'll do 3 miles, 3 days a week, and then a 6-mile long run as 15 miles. So
I struggle with getting in, 30 minutes of walking a day.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm impressed.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not, I think if you had told me even when I was in college that was like going to be like nothing for me now, that I would have told you were crazy. But kind of once you get into the routine of it, you really settle in, and it's pretty easy to get those runs in, and it's just kind of part of my lifestyle now.
Yeah. Well, what motivates you then?
I've always just been a super like fit person. I don't know, fit is maybe not the right word, but maybe like
even in college.
you
motivated the whole team for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
And I just like, I like to be in shape. I like the feeling of being in shape, and running especially, it makes you feel really like almost like powerful. you kind of get into that zone, and you can, I run a lot of times, I'll run without headphones, and I'll just kind of like let my thoughts wander. I can, decompress from the day. It's a huge stress relief for me. So I love that. Just kind of like sort through life as I'm running. And sometimes as I start to run longer, I have to have something to distract me, because, if you're running for 2 hours, I can't entertain myself for that long. But a 30-minute run, you can kind of just like think about your day, get some things off your mind or whatever. And so, yeah, so I just kind of, it's a routine for sure.
That's really cool. So like you said your friend got you into training for that half marathon, but did they give you any techniques when you started that, or did they just say like run with me and you just figured it out?
Yeah. So she also was a volleyball player, had never really had any running experience either. So we both just kind of like dove headfirst into this like running world with no formal training. I mean, I had run track in high school, so I had some like baseline, like this is how you should run, forward lean at the waist sort of thing. But I was a sprinter in high school, so it's very different than distance running. So unfortunately for me, I did not have any technique, and that caused a lot of like small injuries at the beginning of my running journey. But kind of as both me and my friend, as we got deeper into like, okay, this is something we're doing now and not just like something we did once, we really started listening to podcasts and, following people on Instagram that would kind of give really good tips. And then kind of doing our own research, and, throughout, it's been almost 6 years now that we've kind of like developed into the technique that we need to be using so that we are staying injury free. So.
Oh, wow. So I was going to ask you that. So you're learning your techniques and improving, but have you ever really injured yourself in a marathon, where it kind of put you out, or, a big injury?
Yeah, actually, so I've had just about every minor injury you can have, but I had one that took me out for about 6 weeks. It was my second marathon, and about the last 3 miles, I started getting some pretty intense knee pain. But at that point, like your whole body just hurts. So like I didn't think too much of it. I thought, in a day or two, this will be gone. And it turns out I had like a cramp in my IT band, which is a pretty common running injury. And it's just a really thick muscle. So the cramps don't come out as easily as like a calf cramp would. So it took me about 6 weeks of rest and foam rolling and stretching and anything I could do, and just like biking. I could bike without it being painful, but I couldn't run more than maybe half a mile before my knee would really start to hurt. So, but eventually I did sort that out, and that was due to I wasn't cross training enough. So I had some weak glute muscles and weak hip muscles. Okay. That kind of failed there towards the end. So this is the first marathon I'm currently in a cycle that I'm training for since that injury. I've done some half marathons, but that doesn't put quite the stress on your body as a full marathon. So I'm trying to be really diligent about strength training my lower body this time around to keep that from happening again.
So it sounds to me like you're saying strength training, cross training is very important if you're a runner and you do marathons.
Yes, absolutely. Which is something I definitely didn't know when I started running. I knew it was something you were supposed to do, but I didn't realize quite the importance of it until I started injuring myself, all the time. So with all these, shin splints and plantar fasciitis, and you get all the little niggles and everything. But yeah, so strength training, it's basically the best way to keep yourself from getting injured is if you do, it's just, basic squats, lunges, glute bridges, like clamshells are great. And then core work, obviously, are all really good things just to kind of keep all your muscles strong. Because, running, you're only using so many things, and you have all those auxiliary muscles and tendons that need to be strengthened as well in order to keep your body as stable as possible. So if you're not like actively using those all the time, in other ways, you need to be cross training.
How do you do that then? If you run that often, like 15 to 20 miles a week, when do you find time to cross train? Do you just do that in your home? Or?
Yeah. So, yeah. So I just bought a house. So now I have a home gym in my basement. So I just have a little yoga mat. I do workouts from a girl on YouTube who does, great at home workouts. I have 5 and 10 pound dumbbells and some resistance bands. And, you can just find great workouts at home that are, just do a half hour after. Because if I do a 20-minute run, 30-minute run, I'll just do a half hour workout, and that's still only an hour workout at home. So.
Do you prefer to run or work out before work or after?
I am an afternoon runner. I would actually love to run in the morning, but I have to be at work a little too early. So, except for maybe the month of June, it would be dark outside every time I would go for a run. So, so I typically run right after work before dinner.
Cool. So when you're training and everything, and I guess even during a race, how do you pace yourself and what are you using for fuel while you're racing?
Yeah, so I have a Garmin watch, which is how I mostly pace myself. It'll kind of give you every mile, it'll ding and tell you what that mile was. But you can also, in certain watches, they'll show you like your current pace too. So like as you're actively running, it'll kind of update every like 0.1 miles to kind of like show you what pace you're running at that moment. So I have one of those, which helps a lot. At this point, though, I pretty much can just go by effort and know how fast I'm running, unless I'm really trying to push myself. But I can usually just go by, how I'm feeling, how my body's moving. For pacing, it's kind of one of those things you start off and you don't really know how fast you're going, and you kind of figure it out over time. Yeah, so for fueling, I use these things called goos. And they're just basically it's just like straight sugar, and there's some sodium and amino acids thrown in there too, and sometimes caffeine, depending on which one you use. There's like 100-calorie little shot. It's like caramel, basically. Okay. Is kind of the texture. You just wash that down with some water. It's simple carbs, so that's fast energy. But people use all sorts of things. They have like honey version. They have like ones that are more like gummy bears kind of things. Some people just eat granola bars or nuts, so it kind of depends on what you want to do. But yeah, that's what I typically use those. It's basically just sugar packets.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you're doing this as you're running?
Yeah. So usually I'll stop and walk to eat it, because if I'm not running that fast in a marathon, I can take a little walk break, and sometimes I want a little walk break. So I'll just, you kind of rip them open. They're like about 2 inches tall, and you just kind of rip them open, squeeze them into your mouth, and then wash it down with some water. So then I'll start running again.
Do you train with your friend every day, or is this something you just meet up at marathons? You guys started, yeah.
Yeah, so she lives about an hour from me. So on the day-to-day basis, we don't train together, but we usually a couple of times we'll do long runs together during training cycle. Then we almost always race together. I haven't done a whole lot of races without her, actually. So, but she's much faster than I am, so we don't usually race together. But we show up together, and she'll do long runs with me sometimes. But yeah, but it's good to have a friend at least who's going through it at the same time as you, whether it's training or racing, just to kind of commiserate a little bit and celebrate together too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's really important.
How long are half marathons and then full marathons? Are they different kilometers, or are they basically the same?
Yeah, so a half marathon is 13.1 miles, and I think that's 21.1 kilometers. And then a full marathon is 26.2 miles. I think it's 42.2 kilometers.
Wow. So what do you like most about running these marathons?
So a marathon for me, I think it's like kind of, it's kind of like a prolific distance. It's kind of like the whole, I don't even know the history of it. The guy in Athens who ran from Athens to Marathon, or Marathon to Athens, and then delivered the news of the victory and then dropped dead, that whole story, it's just kind of the folklore of it. To kind of be a part of that has always been kind of cool to me, because my whole life, I'd known people would run marathons and it just seemed so unattainable. And then once I kind of decided to do it and realized that I could, it was kind of a really cool realization. And I truly believe that anybody who wants to run a marathon can do it. You just kind of have to be dedicated to the training, and you can do it.
Did you hear that, Dalaney?
Did you also hear she said wants to do it?
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's a great challenge. I'm definitely the type of person who likes to push myself, and I always need big goals to make myself get out of bed in the morning. So yeah, and when you finish, it's the greatest feeling in the world when you cross that finish line, and it's awesome.
Well, I was going to ask you, what do you do, and maybe with your friend or other marathon runners at the time in those races, what do you guys do after the race?
So maybe immediately after, well, usually there's beer at the finish line. So if you can walk to go get the beer, we usually go have a beer or two, and then waddle back to our hotel rooms take a shower, because that's sometimes all you want to do is just sit down and then eat and eat and eat, because you probably burned almost 3,000 calories just then. So, but yeah, so usually you take a moment and you kind of we'll sit there. Usually there's like a grass area at the finish line, and you'll kind of sit there, and there's usually music and there's tons of people, and you kind of just like take it all in. But then eventually you do just want to get up and go take a shower if you lay down. So yeah.
Do you travel for your marathons, or are most of them within the vicinity that you can drive to?
So far,
fly?
my first marathon was in Akron, Ohio, the Akron Marathon, which it was an amazing race. Highly recommend any of their races to anybody. They put on a great race. So that's only about 20 minutes from me. So that one was local. And then the second one I did was in Columbus. So that was about a 2-hour drive, and we stayed in a hotel the night before. And then this next one we're doing, though, is in Minnesota. So I'm going to have to fly there, and we'll stay there a couple days to do that one. So it's kind of been a mix. I like to do local ones just because it's easier to get there. It's not as much planning, you don't have to pay for a hotel if it's close, but traveling for the big races is fun because it just like hypes up the whole experience a little bit more.
Yeah, and you probably get to meet like people who are also traveling for it and share the same, love of the run.
Yeah, it's awesome. And so before all these big races, they always have expos, and not so much this past year just because of COVID and everything, but I'm hoping we get back to them because they're always so awesome. They'll have, some of these big ones will have, Olympic marathoners and Olympic distance runners will be there, and they'll do like a Q&A panel that you can sit and watch. And then there'll be all these booths that'll have all the different gear and the different energy sources and, all that stuff that you can like kind of walk through, and then you can kind of like meet people and, kind of like commingle with your fellow marathoners and all that stuff. So that's a really fun part that you kind of do pre-race.
So how do they, first, are there a certain amount they allow in the event, and how do they line you guys up?
Yeah, so most races, they do have caps. It depends on usually the city that you're in and, just kind of the general size of the race. I know the one that I'm going to run, it typically has like a 40,000 person participation. It's a huge one. But then, the one I run in Akron, I think is like maybe 4,000 or 5,000 people. So it is a lot of people. And the bigger it is, the more logistics, I think, go into all of it. So they kind of, what you do is usually when you sign up for the race, you'll give like an estimated pace that you want to run it at, and you don't have to stick to that pace, but they just kind of want a general idea. And then they'll line you up at the start of the race based on that pace that you said you're going to run. Yeah. And so they'll kind of have, Akron, I think there's usually 4 or 5 corrals. And when you pick up your bib the night before, it'll have your corral letter or number on it. And so then when it's race morning, you have to show your bib to get into your corral. And then they just kind of like load you all into these, it's just like gated off areas, and they just load you into them, and you're packed and they're like sardines. And then they'll kind of set off one, like the fastest people obviously are in the front, and the slower you are, the farther back you are. So I'm usually somewhere in the middle, but yeah. But so then, they'll set off one corral and let all those people start. And then there'll maybe be a 2 or 3 minute delay, and then they'll walk up the second corral and set them off and stuff. So, which sometimes I did a half marathon in Chicago, and I think it took an hour and a half to actually release everyone from their corrals because there was just so many people.
Wow.
So marathon running isn't really competitive. You're doing it for yourself, right? In your own time and all that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah. Because usually races, they'll be an elite division, but that's maybe 15 to 20 people that have a genuine shot at winning it. And those are people that a lot of times that's their job. They're not just doing this for fun. They're professional runners. They have sponsors and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, for the average person running a marathon, they're not going to win it. So they're just running to make their personal best, or to just run it and feel good the whole time, or just run it and cross the finish line before they tell you you have to get off the course, So yeah, it's really just about the personal journey for most people.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. Well, cool. Well, I guess one more question. Do you have any advice for people listening who may want to get involved with this marathon running?
Yeah, I would say if you're not currently a runner, start small. Don't just jump right into a marathon plan, because you'll probably hurt yourself and it won't be very fun and you'll never want to do it again. So I would say if you're not a runner at all, start with maybe a 5K or a 10K, do a training plan, an 8-week or so training plan, set that up, do the race, and then maybe from there move to a half marathon, do a 12-week training plan, run the half marathon, and then maybe get into the marathon distance. But you really do need to have a pretty solid base of running under you before you jump into the marathon. And then another thing is get fitted for shoes from a running store. Don't go to Dick's Sporting Goods and pick out the cheapest pair, because you'll hurt your feet. Everyone has, different arches, different, you can pronate, you can underpronate, overpronate. And if you go to a running store, they'll actually do like a gait analysis, and they'll check your feet, and they'll pull shoes that are for your feet type. And then, you can usually, a lot of times they'll have treadmills in the store, so you can try them on, run, a little bit on the treadmill, see which ones feel the best. But that's key, is having a good pair of running shoes, a good fitting pair of running shoes.
Well, I'm kind of curious what you were talking about before when you said you signed up for the marathon and you give them a pace. So your first marathon, how did that work out? I mean, you probably had no idea.
Yeah, so I had run half marathons at that point, so I knew what a half marathon pace for me was. And then there's kind of these they don't really care. I could have put that I was going to be running 6-minute miles, and I just would have been getting passed by a lot of people, at the beginning. And they probably would have been pretty mad at me, because that kind of slows down the whole thing. They're having to weave in. But if you run like a 10K or a half marathon, you can go online and they'll have these marathon time predictors, where they basically just use like the averages of a bunch of race data to kind of give you a window of like where you might finish based on like your training and everything. So I went on there and kind of just plugged in some data and got a general idea. And I think I actually did finish maybe within 20 minutes of that time. So it was pretty accurate.
Yeah.
So if you put in that you are, that you run an 8-minute mile, can you sustain that for as long as the marathon is 24, yes. 42?
I mean, I guess it depends. I can run an 8-minute mile, but I cannot run an 8-minute mile for very long. But yeah, I mean, like if you can run an 8-minute pace for a half marathon, there's no reason that you couldn't do that for a full marathon, with the right training and everything. Definitely would take some work, but you could do it.
So what's the smallest marathon they have? So Dalaney and I can put down, we run 20-minute miles. Right out.
Closest 5K.
Yeah. No, I mean, they have marathons that, because a lot of marathons have cutoff times. So you have to be off the course in a certain amount of time. And sometimes that's like a 15-minute pace. Sometimes it's like, a 20-minute pace. So it's like walker friendly is what they'll call that race. So, and that usually just has to do with zoning, how long they can keep the police, on their payroll, and how long, to keep the roads closed and direct traffic and that sort of stuff. But so it depends. But a lot of times trail races, if you have a local trail, they'll do races there, and they usually let people hike them. So
Dalaney, I think we should find a walker friendly marathon.
I could do a walker friendly,
yeah,
hiking marathon.
Yes,
we should try that.
That's great.
Well, that was a lot of great information.
Yeah.
I think I am now inspired to do a marathon.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, honestly, when I trained for a marathon for the first time, it was really eye-opening that it's really just about putting the work in. Our bodies were made to run, we're biologically designed to be able to do this. And, nobody can just walk out the door and do it, but if you put in the work as human beings, we can do it. There's some pretty cool research out there about, I was just listening to a podcast, this guy from Harvard had done research about just like the biology of running and the human evolution that led to us being runners. And they said in Africa, there was tribes that would do persistence. And that's where they would literally pick out a gazelle and run it to death. And that would take 20 to 30 miles, but they could, they just pick one out, go out in a group, and they would be able to run this gazelle to death and then eat it. And that's how they would get their food. So,
wow.
Yeah.
I can think of easier ways, but
yeah,
that's great.
I mean, that's a little, ancient pre-tools, probably pre-spears that they could throw, but it's something, and there's still tribes that will, practice that today.
Oh, that's cool.
Just as kind of an activity, not so much as actual resource for
as a
food,
need to,
but
yeah. But the tradition, like you were talking about with Greece and like running to the town of Marathon, like that's,
yeah,
the tradition is pretty
yeah,
cool.
yeah. But
Well,
yeah, the book Born to Run is a pretty cool book that kind of dives into more the biology of, the arches of our feet versus having flat feet, like certain primates do and stuff that kind of make us more born for running, evolved for running, which is pretty cool. And it's just like it can become a very spiritual experience when you look at it that way too. So which is nice.
wow. Well, thank you. That's very inspiring.
Yeah, thanks, Trent.
Thank you guys for having me. This has
Of
been fun.
course. Well, thanks everyone for listening. And again, we want to hear from you guys. We always want to hear from you guys. Please, please, please reach out to us. And here are just a few ways that you can do that. You can reach out via Instagram and Facebook. Find us at Salty About Health, even Snapchat at Salty Health. You can email us at saltyabouthealth@gmail.com. Or if you just want to find all that in one place, check out our website, saltyabouthealth.com. We've got all the ways for you to listen and connect there. And finally, if you like what you hear today, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. We really appreciate it. So, Mom, if they want to hear from you on social media, where can they find you?
Okay, I am a certified health coach and I do coach one-on-one. So if you're interested, you can contact me at mary@feedyourselfhealthy.com. I also do research for people who are interested in finding alternative approaches to do in conjunction with the health issue or illness their doctor is treating them for. So again, just reach out to me at mary@feedyourselfhealthy.com.
And if you guys want to find me, I'm not a health coach, but I'm on Instagram hanging out there at Dalaney.a. You can find out how to spell my name in the show notes and everything. And of course, I'll be the one mainly keeping an eye on the social media. So always happy to chat with you guys via the Salty Network. Also, just want to shout out our intro and outro music. It is by Yule, and you can find her at www.yulearts.com. That's EULARTS. You can also find her on Instagram at Yule_arts or Spotify and YouTube. Check her out. Her piano music and everything else is amazing. And until next time, stay salty.
Stay salty.